Superman movies ranked.
Then there's no time to waste.
Hello everyone! Superman came out recently and it was my most anticipated movie of the year, and so before the movie came out I watched all the Superman movies. I went through the Christopher Reeve ones, to Superman Returns and Man of Steel. So, including the new Superman movie from 2025, I wanted to rank all of the Superman films. And if you haven't seen the new Superman yet, I'm not going to talk about spoilers with that movie, but I might talk about some spoilers for some of the older Superman movies that they've been around for a while, so. Also, disclaimer, I'm not going to be talking about the crossover movies, so no Batman v Superman or Justice League. I've talked about those movies before, and I don't really feel like doing it again, honestly. I'm not a fan of those movies. They would be low on the list if I had them. I'll just say that.
Kal-El, no!
Alright, without further ado, let's start the ranking.
Number 7.
Superman 3 is a really strange one because it feels like a response to the controversy that went on while Superman 2 was being made. If you didn't know, Richard Donner was the original director for Superman 2 and he filmed quite a bit of footage for the film. He worked a lot on it and then they fired him for creative differences, I guess. And then Richard Lester took over and, reshot a bunch of his scenes and filmed new scenes. It was like a big studio thing that happened with Superman 2. What does this have to do with Superman 3, you ask? Well, Superman 3 is directed by Richard Lester once again, the guy who took over for Richard Donner. And so that upset a lot of the people that worked on Superman 2. Like Margot Kidder, who plays Lois Lane, was not happy about it. Gene Hackman, who plays Lex Luthor, was not happy about it. So Gene Hackman isn't in the movie at all. Margot Kidder has maybe 3 minutes of screen time total. She has a role, but it's very small. And so Superman 3 essentially tries to replace those characters. There's a character who is literally just Lex Luthor, but not named Lex Luthor. He's the same character. There's also a new character that is replacing Lois Lane. She's like Clark Kent's high school sweetheart. And it's really weird watching this movie because Superman 2 spent so much time with Superman and Lois, and it really focused on their relationship and how much he cared about her and how much he was willing to sacrifice for her. And so it's really weird in Superman 3 when all of a sudden he's interested in this new girl, and it's like... And that's one of my big problems with Superman 3 and why it's the last on the list, is that it really tries to backtrack on Superman 2 and introduce these new characters and replace some of the most iconic characters in Superman lore, like Lois Lane and Lex Luthor. Richard Pryor is in this movie. He plays a character that gets a lot of screen time, and he had a few chuckles from me, but overall I really didn't enjoy his character. They spend so much time on him. There's a lot of times where it's just about Richard Pryor doing his hacking stuff or whatever. And I'm like, can we go back to Christopher Reeve as Superman? Can we focus on Superman instead of Richard Pryor playing whoever the this is? Christopher Reeve is still great in the film. I think that he is Superman. He always will be. No matter who comes into the role, I think Christopher Reeve is always the face that I will picture when I hear the name Superman. Superman 3 has some interesting sequences, but a lot of the movie is boring. It's just I was just kind of nodding off, and I think that's one of the worst sins that a movie can have.
Number 6.
Superman 4, A Quest for Peace. People might be surprised that this isn't last on the list. It's actually higher than Superman 3. Yeah, I did appreciate how this movie brought back Gene Hackman and Lois Lane, at least, when Superman 3 tried to replace them. I appreciated that. Do they have anything interesting to do in the movie? Not really, but at least they're there, Superman 4 is Batman and Robin territory. This movie is hilarious. I had a great time, and that doesn't mean it's a good movie, but I enjoyed it a lot more than Superman 3 just because it's so ridiculous and badly made that I was just laughing. I was having a great time. This would be a great movie to watch while you're drunk or high or something. Nuclear Man is incredible. That's such an insane character, and I just had so much fun. And again, it's not a good movie, but I had a great time with it.
Number 5.
Man of Steel to this day is still a very divisive movie. A lot of people are in love with it, and they're every Superman movie needs to be like this. Zack Snyder is the king, and then there are other people who hate it and think it's the worst thing ever. I'm a little bit in the middle. I'm definitely not a Zack Snyder fan, but this is one of his more competent movies. I think this is a lot better than whatever he tried to do with Batman v Superman. I also think it's better than his cut of Justice League. But I still don't think that it's a good movie. It was actually my first Superman movie that I ever saw. For some reason, I didn't watch the Christopher Reeve movies as a kid. This was the first one I saw, and I loved it at the time. Like, when I was 13, I had a great time with it. And then as I got older, I started to sour on it a little bit. There are positives to this movie on my rewatch that I noticed. One of the things I really liked is the opening sequence on Krypton. Like, all of that was done really well. I thought the lore of Krypton was really interesting. Like, there's a lot of interesting things that they tell you about the world and what the people are trying to do there. And I thought that was interesting. I thought that was a cool change of pace, because the other movies don't really get into Krypton at all. This movie explores that lore more, and I found that intriguing. After the opening sequence of the movie, it starts to leave me behind a little bit. The Dark Knight Rises had come out the year prior. The Dark Knight trilogy was a huge deal. Especially The Dark Knight is an incredible film. They were acclaimed, and they made a lot of money, and they were really popular, and so a lot of other movies tried to replicate that. And this is essentially Zack Snyder trying to make The Dark Knight with Superman. He's trying to make him realistic and dark and gritty, and I just think that's inherently a bad idea. Superman is a kind of a ridiculous character. He has a cape, and he flies around and saves people. I like when Superman is joyful and colorful and whimsical. What's interesting about Man of Steel is that Christopher Nolan is also a writer on the movie. I feel like a lot of people don't mention that. He actually worked on the script, and yeah, it's not my favorite Christopher Nolan script. I think Batman is more malleable. I think you can make him more ridiculous, but you can also make him grounded. Because he's a rich guy with no powers, and he's able to do all this stuff because of his wealth. And I think that is a more grounded character just in general than Superman. Man of Steel doesn't have any of the optimism or the hope that Superman should have in my eyes. Henry Cavill is a talented actor. I've liked him in other roles. I really loved him in Mission Impossible Fallout. Thought he played a great villain in that movie. I don't necessarily think they ever made him good as Superman. I think he could have been great in this role, but Man of Steel is so determined to make him dark and moody, I guess. I don't know if moody is the right word, but he's kind of just a blank slate. He's really dull in the movie. And a lot of characters are that way. A lot of characters in Man of Steel are just kind of dull, blank slates. Amy Adams, Kevin Costner, Lawrence Fishburne, all great actors. They're great in other things. They are dull as bricks in Man of Steel. It's so strange. The one performance that I love in Man of Steel, and it really helps the movie not be as terrible as it could have been, is Michael Shannon as General Zod. I love this performance. Michael Shannon is intimidating, he's scary, he has a motivation that makes sense. He's on another level from the rest of the cast. Michael Shannon is giving this movie his all. I wish the rest of the cast were on the same level as Michael Shannon. I wish they were made into interesting characters like General Zod is in this movie. I think Michael Shannon is leagues better than Terrence Stamp as General Zod. I feel like not enough people talk about how good Michael Shannon is in this movie, and I think it's because a lot of the lesser aspects of Man of Steel kind of overshadow how good Michael Shannon is. The movie is also humorless. It has maybe 5 attempts at jokes in the entire thing, which is weird for Superman, and all of the jokes are not very funny. There's a lot of really awkward moments where they try to be funny, and it's am I supposed to be laughing here? I don't know.
What's the S stand for?
It's not an S. On my world, it means hope.
Well, here it's an S.
The action sequences just go on, and it's just slamming into buildings, and it's just, I don't care that much about the characters. One of the common complaints with Man of Steel is that, so many buildings go down, and it's 9/11 times 10 on Metropolis, and it is partially Superman's fault, He didn't do much to try to prevent this. Even early on in the movie, Kevin Costner is giving Superman all these speeches about how he shouldn't show himself yet. He maybe shouldn't have saved that bus of children. He shouldn't save him if he's about to die. And it's all very frustrating to watch. It feels like Zack Snyder was really trying to make an important message with Pa Kent in this movie. And it really feels convoluted and strange. Like, I don't know what they were thinking with those messages. It's like, yes, he should have saved the bus of children. Yes, he should have saved Pa Kent in the tornado. Like, there are definitely things I like about Man of Steel. Michael Shannon really carries certain parts of the film and makes them not terrible. Russell Crowe is solid as Jor-El. Yeah, but overall it doesn't work for me. And I don't think it's terrible. I think it's just kind of meh.
Number 4.
Superman Returns is weird in that it's a continuation of the Christopher Reeve universe, but it's a different actor. You know, all the cast is different. It takes place in the 2000s, weirdly. I mean, the movie was made in the 2000s, but if this is a sequel to the Christopher Reeve movies, wouldn't it be set in the 80s? Like, why is it in the 2000s? Why do we have flip phones here? But it was interesting to see a movie kind of try to recast the Christopher Reeve universe and continue that story. And this movie kind of ignores Superman 3 and 4, and it's basically a sequel to Superman 2. That was a very interesting approach. You don't see that often with sequels, where they're like, all right, we're going to recast everyone and continue a movie from, like, 30 years prior or so. I think Superman Returns is decent. It's okay. Brandon Routh is kind of my biggest issue with the movie. He's the one who plays Superman. He is definitely trying to be like Christopher Reeve, obviously, because this is supposed to be Christopher Reeve's Superman. It's the same character. And so he's stuck with trying to imitate Christopher Reeve, and it feels like a bad imitation sometimes. And they don't do a lot to make him have the same charisma as Christopher Reeve. He's not that great in the role, unfortunately, and I'm sure it wasn't Brandon Routh's fault. It's just... I also didn't like how there are a lot of scenes where he's, like, spying on Lois Lane when she's, like, in her house or in an elevator. He's, like, using his x-ray vision and creeping on her. That was weird. I didn't need that. And maybe it's because Bryan Singer directed this movie. Maybe that's... A lot of the supporting cast is good, though. Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane, she does a good job. I liked how this movie explored the relationship between Clark and Lois again. And it kind of continued what was happening in Superman 2. Unlike Superman 3, it actually does continue that relationship. And I found that interesting. I'm not going to get into the controversy surrounding Kevin Spacey as a human being, because this is not the place for that. But he does admittedly play a really good Lex Luthor. I enjoyed his performance a lot in the movie. He's kind of similar to Gene Hackman, but he's more threatening. I thought he did a good job. It's a decent Superman movie. There are a lot of sequences that I thought were pretty good. I liked some of the plot twists in the movie. It's just not a great Superman movie, in my opinion.
Number 3.
Alright, we finally got to Superman 2, which I've talked about several times already in the video because there was some context that needed to be provided for some of the other movies. Yeah, there was a lot of drama that went on when this movie was being made, but you can't tell watching the original cut of the film. Like, if I didn't know about the drama, I wouldn't have suspected anything. Like, it's done, it's made pretty well, considering all that stuff was happening behind the scenes. There are 2 cuts of the movie. There's the Richard Donner cut and the Richard Lester cut. Obviously. And I'm going to be talking about both of them in this section. I think they would probably both be at this spot anyway, so I'm just going to lump them in the same ranking. One of the issues I have with both cuts is that they really go through the mortality arc very fast. There's the arc where Superman decides to be human so that he can be with Lois Lane, and then he gets beaten up and he's immediately like, all right, I need to be Superman again. That was so quick. It's like, that was a really interesting plot device, and they just kind of got rid of it so fast. And it's the same problem in both cuts of the movie. I think Richard Donner actually handles that arc slightly better. It still has a lot of the same problems of being rushed, but I liked that Marlon Brando was in the movie, and the difference with Marlon Brando's scenes as opposed to Superman's mother in the theatrical cut is that Marlon Brando really puts the stakes on Superman. He's like, this is a really big decision to turn into a human, like, you really got to take this seriously. And that was handled better, I thought. I really liked that Marlon Brando put the stakes on the character. I thought there wasn't enough of that in the theatrical cut. In terms of which cut of the movie is better, I think I actually ever so slightly prefer the theatrical cut. Because my big problem with the Richard Donner cut is that they really rush through a lot. Like, the relationship between Clark and Lois is really rushed. They really wanted to get to that point where she finds out that he's Superman very quickly. But the theatrical cut takes its time, and it spends a lot more time with them as characters. And I liked that better. I liked that this movie actually took its time with Clark and Lois. I feel like you could make a cut of Superman 2 where most of it is the theatrical cut, but keep in the Marlon Brando scenes, and that would probably be my favorite version of the movie. One thing's for sure, though, I did find the villains pretty bland in both versions. General Zod has a few funny moments, but he's not that interesting of a character. He's kind of just a little boring. And again, I thought Michael Shannon did the character way better, even though I think this movie is better than Man of Steel as a whole. I don't know. They didn't quite work for me. And they're not terrible. They were just kind of forgettable villains. I enjoyed Lex Luthor a lot in this movie, though. Like, he's not even, like, he doesn't even need to be there. He's just kind of a funny B-plot. He's kind of the comic relief. He does have an influence on the plot, but they easily could have taken him out and the movie wouldn't have been that different. I like that Lex Luthor is just kind of there, you know, like influencing the plot in small ways. I thought that was funny, him just kind of being a B-plot. I think both cuts of Superman 2 are good. They both have flaws that are consistent in both movies, but they also both have their own unique flaws. It's weird. Either way, Superman 2 is solid. I like both cuts of the film, but I think the theatrical cut is ever so slightly better.
Number 2.
The original Superman movie from 1978. This movie is a classic. It's great. I really like it. One of the things I like about older superhero movies prior to the MCU and like The Dark Knight and all that stuff is that they were really okay with being comic booky. You know, they could be really over the top and kind of silly. When the MCU came along, a lot of it tried to be more serious, and they tried to be a little bit, they weren't grounded necessarily, but they were a little bit less comic booky, I guess. And I love a lot of those movies. There's a lot of really great ones, but I also think that there is room for joy and whimsy in a superhero movie. There's room for the more comic booky style. But I liked how Tim Burton's Batman, or Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, or Richard Donner's Superman were okay with being joyful and whimsical and just fun. Watching Richard Donner's Superman again really reminded me of how much I miss that tone. I like that Superman interacts with the public and like he saves people, and he's just this beacon of hope. It absolutely felt like Richard Donner's Superman helped inspire Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. This movie was impactful because it was the first big superhero movie, and the impact is felt today still. One of the things I also love about Christopher Reeve is that he plays Clark Kent and Superman very differently, and I love that duality. Like, I think that's what makes Christopher Reeve really iconic as the character, is that he feels like he's playing a totally different character when he's playing Clark Kent versus Superman. And none of the other Superman actors in the live-action films have quite replicated that. Superman is lighthearted, it's fun, and it holds up pretty darn well.
Number 1.
You all saw this coming. James Gunn's Superman from 2025 is my number 1. Is this recency bias? Maybe, but I don't think so. James Gunn finally made Superman fun again. You know, what I was just talking about with that joy and comic book whimsy in superhero movies? He brought it back. James Gunn made a superhero movie that is unapologetically comic booky, and it's fun and kind of campy, and I missed that, like I said. David Cornsweet is, for me, easily the best Superman we've had since Christopher Reeve. I think he is spectacular in the role. The big thing that makes David Cornsweet stand out as Superman is that this version of Superman has a very high sense of justice. And what I mean by that is that he gets angry when things aren't fair. And it's justifiable anger every time he's angry. He's angry about something that is just not fair in the world. He's a very kind, empathetic person, and he's sensitive, and he's emotional. And this movie said that being that way is okay. This is a movie that came out in 2025, and so it feels kind of irrelevant, because in 2025, we're living in cynicism and just people who aren't kind anymore, who don't think of others. And this specific Superman movie is about a kind person that's in a world full of cynics. He's hopeful and optimistic even when things seem dark. And that was really important to me. I really related to that, and I think it's a great message right now. This movie has a lot of characters, and I was shocked at how well the movie was balanced. You got your standard Superman characters like Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Ma and Pa Kent. But this movie also has the Justice Gang. This is set in a world where superheroes already exist. And so you have this trio of superheroes that are hanging out in Metropolis, and they would occasionally help Superman. And one of the things I liked about the Justice Gang is that they're a lot more cynical than Superman is, and so you kind of see that contrast whenever they're interacting. This movie also has Krypto, who I absolutely loved. So good. He reminded me a lot of the new puppy that I got this year. His name is Indy. They have a very similar personality. Just imagine Krypto, but without superpowers and, you know, a little bit more of a scaredy cat. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor is getting a ton of praise, and it's deserved. I think this is the best version of Lex Luthor. He feels like he's satirizing modern billionaires. Like, he works really well in the film. I think this is also my favorite iteration of Lois Lane as well. They do something really different between her relationship with Superman that I won't spoil, but it felt like a relationship between Clark and Lois that we had never seen before. I liked that she was also a little bit more cynical than Superman might be, and that can make them clash sometimes. It is very obvious with this movie that James Gunn was trying to make a Superman movie that we had never seen before. This narrative feels very different from Superman movies in the past, and that was great. We hear about Superman's origin throughout the movie, but this movie is not an origin story for Superman. It kind of throws you right in there. And some people have taken issue with that, the fact that this movie starts at a really fast pace, and it just throws you right in. But I didn't have an issue with any of that, because I grew up watching Star Wars, and like, pretty much every Star Wars movie just kind of throws you in the action right at the beginning. That is a very George Lucas thing, and James Gunn mentioned that, you know, Star Wars inspired him in that way. It worked for me. I think this movie gives you enough details to where you have context for what's going on. One of the things people also complain about with this movie is that there's a lot of humor. It is probably the most humorous Superman movie, which isn't too surprising considering James Gunn is making this film. However, it doesn't feel like a full-on comedy like a lot of James Gunn's other work. This movie tones down the humor when compared to something like Guardians of the Galaxy, but there is still a lot of it, and that's fine. I like humor in my Superman movies. The original Christopher Reeve movie had a lot of humor as well. I think it's a necessary thing to have. Superman is a hopeful movie about being empathetic and kind and how it's okay to show emotions, and I loved it. I thought this movie was spectacular. It made me feel really hopeful and happy, and that's what a Superman movie should do. I can also say that I've had a very diminishing interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and so it feels really good to be excited about a superhero cinematic universe again. I can't wait for Supergirl, Peacemaker Season 2, can't wait for Lanterns and Clayface and just all the other stuff that James Gunn is doing. It's really cool that we have a director-writer in the studio executive chair because he really cares about the creative process. Anyway, thanks for watching my video, everybody. Probably by the time that this video is out, I will have released my new movie, The Sunny D Addiction comedy sketch. Check that out if you want. It was a lot of fun to make that. I love making movies. I'm always gonna, promote my stuff if I can. And yeah, I hope you all have a great morning, night, or afternoon, or whatever time it is that you're watching this video. Bye, guys. There's a plane. There's a plane. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman. I'm not gonna put that in.